Hey there, Silver Recaps here. Watch out as we dive into a thrilling story filled with twists, secrets, and betrayal. Let's get started. The story begins with a group of people enjoying themselves at the beach. Among them is a boy named Doug, who is on vacation with his parents. While everyone is relaxing, Doug is deeply engrossed in a book. After a while, he looks out of the car window to admire the scenic view of the ocean. A little later, they arrive at their lake house and begin unloading their belongings. Doug notices several boats docked along the lakeside and decides to wander over. There, he meets his friend, who shares some exciting news. This year, a lot of girls have come to the area, and he's confident it's going to be a fun summer. Doug's friend eagerly declares, "This summer is going to be unforgettable." Afterwards, Doug returns home, calling out to announce his arrival, but no one seems to be there. He heads to his room and starts flipping through some old photographs. While looking out the window, he spots a couple who have just arrived nearby. Their names are Elliot and Lena. Doug's attention is immediately drawn to Lena, who is breathtakingly beautiful. He watches her closely as she moves around, completely mesmerized. However, the couple soon goes inside their house, but Doug can't stop himself from trying to catch another glimpse of Lena. When she notices him staring, Doug panics and quickly hides behind the window, hoping she didn't see him. Still curious, Doug grabs his bike and heads outside. Pretending to fix his bike, he positions himself where he can secretly watch Lena. He sees her quietly cleaning dirt off her shoes, completely lost in her own world, and Doug can't take his eyes off her. After this, Doug meets up with his friend again, and they continue talking about the girls in the area. Together, they grab a mat and head toward an old, abandoned boat. While exploring the boat, they hear the sound of someone laughing on the other side, which piques their curiosity. Later, Doug returns home and notices that new neighbors have moved in. His father calls him to come and meet them. During their introduction, Doug learns that the neighbor, Elliot, knows a lot about boats. Elliot offers Doug a job working on his boat, promising to pay him more than he would make mowing lawns. The next day, Doug goes to Elliot's boat, where he sees Lena stepping outside. She catches his attention once again. A little later, Lena goes to take a bath, and Doug can't stop himself from watching her. He hides as she undresses and continues staring, completely entranced. Just then, Elliot shows up and interrupts Doug's gaze. He asks Doug about the condition of the boat. Doug mentions there's some minor cosmetic damage, and Elliot tells him that he'll be out of town for a few days. They discuss payment for the work, and while Doug asks for $12, Elliot generously offers him $20 instead. That night, Doug looks toward his neighbor's house again and sees Lena in her room, changing clothes. However, his gaze is interrupted when he notices another man, Ray, entering Lena's room. Ray starts forcing himself on Lena, and Doug, disturbed by what he sees, turns away, unable to watch any longer. The next day, Elliot is driving his car past the lakefront when a guard stops him and asks to see his ID card. Elliot shows his card without hesitation. At that moment, Doug arrives and jokingly comments that the guard is a bit strict. Elliot laughs and says he likes it that way. Later, Doug and Elliot are on the boat, and Doug asks how Elliot became so successful. Elliot attributes it to a combination of money and personality. The scene shifts, and Doug is back in his room, watching Lena through his window as she heads out. Moments later, Doug hears Lena scream and rushes to her aid. He finds her standing outside her car, visibly shaken. She explains that there's a spider inside the car. Doug calmly removes the spider and crushes it, which seems to put Lena at ease. After fixing her car, Lena moves closer to Doug, making him nervous. Doug later shares the incident with his friend, who warns him to stay away from Lena, claiming she seems dangerous. That evening, as Doug returns home from work, he notices Lena sitting outside her house. Curious, he approaches her, and Lena explains that she's locked herself out, having lost her keys. She asks Doug for help and insists he keep it a secret, as her husband had asked her to be more responsible. Suddenly, it starts raining. Lena suggests Doug break a window to get inside and unlock the door. Doug hesitates, but eventually agrees, climbing through the broken window and unlocking the door from the inside. Once inside, Lena invites Doug to stay for a drink. As they sit and talk, Lena notices a small injury on Doug's hand. She gently cleans the wound and reassures him in a soft voice that he'll be fine. In a moment of spontaneity, Doug kisses her but quickly apologizes, saying it wasn't a good kiss. Lena doesn't seem upset and playfully encourages him to try again, this time properly. They kiss again, and their chemistry grows. Lena begins to undress, and Doug nervously helps her. The two become intimate, giving in to the undeniable attraction between them. The next morning, Doug and Lena wake up together in bed. Lena compliments Doug, saying he was amazing, and playfully asks if he's been with anyone before. Doug jokingly responds that it's only his third time. Lena smiles and snuggles next to him. Later, Doug returns home, grinning as he recalls the moments he shared with Lena. He feels happy and energized. He meets up with his friend, who teases him, saying he accidentally called Doug the previous night and heard everything. Doug is shocked as his friend plays a recording of the sounds Doug made while he was with Lena. Embarrassed, Doug tries to change the subject, but his friend points towards some girls and suggests Doug should try hooking up with them. Doug, uninterested, ignores the suggestion. Over the next few days, Doug becomes even more obsessed with Lena. He starts working out and paying extra attention to himself, hoping to impress her. One day, while working on the boat, Lena shows up and says she's been sent to check on his progress. They head inside the boat and Lena asks Doug to close the curtains. Once he does, she begins flirting with him, teasingly removing her clothes. They kiss passionately and become intimate again. Later that night, Doug is working at a bar when Lena enters with her husband. Doug notices her immediately but tries to stay out of sight. His friend, however, comes up behind him, points at some girls in the bar, and confidently predicts that something good might happen that night. Doug brushes it off, still fixated on Lena. The next day, Doug is riding his bike when he sees Lena stopping at a store. He decides to follow her. Inside the store, they exchange glances before sneaking out through the back door. Once outside, they start kissing and quickly become intimate again. However, just as they are caught up in the moment, Elliot starts looking for Lena and approaches the area. Hearing him, Lena and Doug stop immediately. Before leaving, Lena gives Doug a quick kiss and hurries back, leaving Doug both thrilled and anxious. A while later, Elliot sees Doug working on the boat and comments that he isn't doing a thorough job. Elliot gives him a lecture, saying that Doug reminds him of his younger days, but adds that he expects more effort for the money he's paying him. He then informs Doug that he'll be out of town for a few days and leaves. Taking advantage of Elliot's absence, Doug meets Lena again. Together, they set up a picnic on the bed and share intimate conversations. During this time, Lena hands Doug a phone, explaining that Elliot is a dangerous and short-tempered man, and the phone will help them communicate discreetly. Later, Doug rushes into the kitchen, followed by Lena, but they fail to notice someone watching them through the window. Nervously, Doug heads back to the boat and sees Elliot standing there. Doug cautiously approaches, only to find Lena with Elliot. Elliot asks Doug to untie the boat and launch it into the water to test whether it's seaworthy. While sailing, the boat narrowly avoids colliding with a large beam, but Doug manages to steer clear just in time. During the ride, Elliot gives Doug unsolicited advice about women and asks if he has a girlfriend. Doug hesitates, but replies that he does. Suddenly, the boat's engine stalls and Elliot goes to check on it. While they wait, Lena uses the opportunity to quietly confide in Doug. She reveals that she's considering divorcing Elliot, as his temper has become unbearable. Before they can talk further, Elliot returns and instructs Doug to repair the boat. That night, Lena calls Doug. She's crying and tells him that Elliot physically abused her before leaving on a business trip. Doug rushes to the hospital to see her and urges Lena to report Elliot to the police. However, Lena refuses, pleading with Doug not to involve the authorities. Doug takes her back home instead. The next day, while Doug is working, Lena calls him again. She's sunbathing by the lakeside and invites him over. The two meet at an old boat where they become intimate once more. During their time together, Lena confesses that being with Doug makes her feel free, unlike her life with Elliot. She also opens up about Elliot's first marriage, revealing that he is still embroiled in ongoing legal battles related to it, which adds to the tension in their lives. Doug's friend starts suspecting something is off about him and tries to confront him, saying he saw him with a girl. However, Doug dismisses his concerns and doesn't pay attention to his words. Later, Doug returns home to find that Elliot has come back. Suddenly, Doug receives a call from Lena. He quickly goes to his room to take the call, only to realize that Lena is standing right behind him. She urgently asks him to come with her, saying she desperately needs his help. Doug immediately follows her to her house, where he discovers that Lena and Elliot had a violent fight. In an attempt to defend herself, Lena struck Elliot on the head, which resulted in his death. Lena, now in a panic, pleads with Doug to help her, saying she doesn't want to get into trouble. She asks what they can do to fix the situation. Doug reassures her, saying they'll figure something out, and advises her to act as normal as possible, pretending nothing has happened. After this, Doug heads to work at the bar. When he returns home later that night, he is surprised to see Lena sitting with his parents. The atmosphere feels tense and awkward, and Doug quickly retreats to his room. Later that night, Doug sneaks out and goes to Lena's house. Lena apologizes for visiting his parents, explaining that she couldn't stay at her own house after what had happened. Doug suggests they could frame the incident as an accident to avoid suspicion, but Lena disagrees, saying that claiming it was an accident won't be convincing enough. Doug quickly comes up with a plan. He tells Lena to say that she and Elliot had a fight, after which Elliot stormed out and didn't return. After laying out the plan, Doug takes Elliot's body to his boat to dispose of it. However, as he's about to leave, a security guard spots him and calls out. Addressing him, him as Mr. Harper. Doug mimics Elliot's voice and mannerisms, managing to avoid suspicion, and sails away with the boat. The next morning, the police begin their investigation. From the evidence left behind, it looks like an unfortunate accident. The police visit Lena's house to question her, and Doug watches nervously from a distance. Lena sticks to the plan, telling them about the fight and Elliot's sudden departure. Meanwhile, Doug recalls how he staged the accident. The previous night, after striking Elliot's head with a beam in the boat, Doug doused the area with alcohol and cigarettes before setting the boat on fire to make it appear like an accident. Satisfied that the plan is working, Doug returns to his normal life, continuing his job at the bar. One evening, while serving drinks to some police officers, Doug overhears them discussing the case. They seem to believe it was an accident, but their conversation leaves Doug on edge. Elsewhere, a woman is shown driving into the city. She meets with the police and insists they thoroughly investigate the case, revealing that Elliot had a massive life insurance policy, which is set to be paid out to Lena. The large sum of money makes the police suspicious, and they decide to scrutinize every detail of the case. The woman later questions Lena directly, asking if she was having an affair with anyone. Lena denies it, but grows visibly uncomfortable with the interrogation. Frustrated and overwhelmed, she abruptly leaves. The police continue their investigation, interviewing the security guard who saw Doug near the boat that night. Their questions also lead them to Doug's father, who becomes another piece in their puzzle as they dig deeper into the truth behind Elliot's death. Doug confronts the security guard and asks him what raised his suspicions. The guard reveals that the person he saw that night might not have been Elliot, but someone else impersonating him. This leaves Doug feeling tense. Meanwhile, the insurance agent visits Lena's house to investigate the crime scene, hoping to find evidence. She notices the broken window Doug had shattered to help Lena earlier, which adds to her doubts. The agent then visits Doug's home and questions his parents about Lena's visit. Doug's parents reveal that Lena came specifically to meet Doug, leaving him alarmed as he overhears the conversation. Panicked, Doug tries to call Lena but quickly hangs up when he sees his parents coming. They head to the police station. There, the agent begins questioning Doug, trying to get him to confess. However, Doug's mother intervenes, telling the agent she won't let her son be implicated in this case. Later, Doug receives a message from Lena asking him to meet her at the old boats. When they meet, Lena tells Doug that they need to stay apart for a few days and leaves abruptly. Doug returns home only to find the agent and her team there. The agent demands Doug's fingerprints and saliva for testing. Doug is taken to the police station for further questioning, but remains tight-lipped. Doug confides in his friend and parents about everything that's been happening. Meanwhile, the police receive a match for the blood sample provided by the agent, further implicating Doug. Despite his efforts to prove his innocence, Doug's situation worsens. The gardener, who had seen Lena and Doug together, becomes a crucial witness. However, before the police can reach him, he is mysteriously killed. Realizing the danger he's in, Doug takes his bike and flees to the docks where he finds Lena. As soon as Doug approaches, Lena tears her clothes and starts screaming for help, pretending that Doug tried to assault her. The police arrive and arrest Doug. Despite his protests, they refuse to believe him. Doug pleads with one officer, who eventually lets him go. Doug then heads to Lena's motel to retrieve her cell phone, which he believes holds evidence of his innocence. As soon as he finds the phone, Lena arrives with the agent. Doug confronts the agent, claiming that the phone contains proof of his innocence. However, as the two women prepare to leave, Doug notices a tattoo on the agent's leg, the same tattoo Lena has. In that moment, Doug realizes that the agent and Lena are lovers and have been conspiring together from the start. Everything falls into place for Doug as he recalls the events, understanding that he was merely a pawn in their elaborate scheme. Initially, it seems like the agent might abandon Lena and leave, but in a surprising move, Lena decides to leave the phone behind, allowing Doug a chance to clear his name. The two women then board a flight, taking Elliot's insurance money with them, leaving Doug to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. And with that, the story ends, revealing a dark tale of manipulation and betrayal.